My brother Bruno thought he was being clever. Sitting across from me at Cafe Central with 12 family members watching, fake smile plastered on his face, talking about how family should stick together and how my $1 million inheritance should be shared with those who matter. I almost laughed. This was the same man who locked me out of our childhood home 10 years ago, the same family who blocked my number, returned my letters unopened, and told relatives I was dead to them. They ghosted me for 3,650 days. Then my Aunt Margaret died, left me everything, and suddenly, like magic, I had a family again. What they didn't know was that I had kept every voicemail, every text, every piece of evidence of the day they threw me away, and I was about to play it for everyone at that table. Drop a like if you believe karma is real and comment where you're watching from. Let me take you back to the beginning. 10 years ago, I was 22 years old, fresh out of college with a degree in graphic design and absolutely no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I was living at home in my childhood bedroom, the same room I'd had since I was 7 years old, with the same blue walls and the same scratched wooden desk. I was working part-time at a local coffee shop called The Daily Grind, pulling 20-hour weeks at $12.50 an hour, which came out to about $1,000 a month before taxes. After taxes, I was bringing home maybe $850. That wasn't enough to move out. Not in our city where a studio apartment started at $950 a month. But it also apparently wasn't enough to justify staying in my parents' house. My parents had always been traditional people, the kind who believed there was a right way and a wrong way to do everything. And unfortunately, I seemed to specialize in the wrong way. My father, Richard Montgomery, had worked in banking for 34 years, starting as a teller at age 23 and retiring as a senior loan officer at Pacific Trust Bank when he was 57. He wore the same style of suit every single day for those 34 years. Navy or charcoal gray, white shirt, conservative tie, black leather shoes polished to a mirror shine. He believed in punctuality, fiscal responsibility, and the power of a firm handshake. He had a retirement account worth $680,000, a paid-off house, and a 2012 Toyota Camry that he maintained like it was a vintage Rolls-Royce. He was proud of these things. They represented to him a life well lived. My mother, Patricia Montgomery, was a school administrator for 28 years at Jefferson Middle School. She started as a 5th grade teacher, worked her way up to vice principal, and spent the last 11 years of her career as the head of student services. She was organized, efficient, and deeply invested in appearances. She cared about what the neighbors thought. She cared about what her colleagues thought. She cared about maintaining a certain image of success and respectability. Our house was always immaculate. Our lawn was always trimmed. Our family photos were always professionally done and prominently displayed in matching frames. Everything had to look perfect, even if it wasn't. My brother Bruno was their golden child, their proof that their parenting philosophy worked. Bruno was 5 years older than me, which meant that by the time I was aware enough to understand family dynamics, he was already established as the successful one. He had gone to State University on a partial academic scholarship, graduated summa cum laude with a degree in business administration, and landed a job at Henderson Consulting by age 24 with a starting salary of $62,000 a year. By the time he was 26, he was making $78,000, had bought his first investment property, a small duplex that he rented out for $1,800 a month, and was engaged to a woman named Melissa who worked in marketing and came from a good family. He drove a leased BMW 3 Series. He wore designer suits to work. He had a 401k, a Roth IRA, and a 5-year plan that he had literally printed out and laminated. He was, in my parents' eyes, the model of success, the validation that they had done something right. I was not Bruno. I was the kid who started college as a business major because that's what my parents wanted. Lasted exactly 1 semester before realizing I absolutely hated accounting and economics, and switched to psychology. Then I realized psychology required graduate school if you wanted to do anything meaningful with it, and I definitely didn't want to go to graduate school, so I switched again to communications. Communications was fine, but it was also vague, and I spent most of my junior year feeling lost and aimless. Then I took an elective course in graphic design, discovered I was actually pretty good at it and enjoyed it, and switched my major for the 3rd time. This meant I had to take an extra year to complete all the required courses, which meant an extra year of tuition, which my parents were not thrilled about. I graduated at age 22 with a degree in graphic design, $34,000 in student loans, and absolutely no job prospects. The market was terrible. I sent out 47 applications in my first 2 months after graduation. I got 3 responses. 2 were rejections. 1 was an unpaid internship that required 30 hours a week and offered exposure and experience instead of money. I didn't take it. I couldn't afford to work for free. So I got a job at the Daily Grind making lattes and cleaning espresso machines, figuring I'd do that while I kept looking for real work. My parents tolerated this for exactly 11 months. I remember the exact timeline because I had been marking it on my calendar like some kind of morbid countdown. Month 1, they were patient. "It's tough out there," my father said. "Keep applying." By month 3, there were hints of frustration. "Maybe you should broaden your search," my mother suggested. "Have you thought about retail management?" By month 6, the passive aggression started. "Bruno was financially independent by your age," my father mentioned casually over dinner one night. "He had a career. He had a plan." The implication was clear. You don't. By month 11, the patience was gone. It was March, specifically March 15th, a Tuesday evening that I will remember for the rest of my life. I had just gotten home from an 8-hour shift at the coffee shop. My feet hurt. My back hurt. I smelled like espresso and burnt milk and the weird chemical cleaner we used on the counters. I was tired. I just wanted to take a shower, eat something, and maybe watch a movie. But when I walked into the kitchen, I immediately knew something was wrong. My father was sitting at the kitchen table, hands folded in front of him. My mother was standing by the counter with her arms crossed. Bruno was leaning against the doorframe with this look on his face, this expression that I can only describe as satisfied anticipation. He knew what was coming. He had probably been part of planning it. "Sit down, Daniel," my father said. His voice was cold, formal, like he was conducting a business meeting. I sat down slowly. My heart was already starting to race. "Your mother and I have been discussing your situation," he continued. "You've been out of school for almost a year now. You're 22 years old. You have a degree. Yet you're working 20 hours a week at a coffee shop making, what, $12 an hour? And spending the rest of your time, and I quote, figuring things out. I remember my hands getting cold. That rush of adrenaline you get when you know something bad is about to happen but you can't stop it." I tried to explain. I told him about the 47 applications. I told him about the 3 responses. I told him about how every entry-level graphic design job wanted 3 to 5 years of experience, which made no sense because how were you supposed to get experience if nobody would hire you without experience? I told him I was working on building a portfolio, that I was taking online courses, that I was trying. My father held up his hand, cutting me off mid-sentence. "We're not interested in excuses," he said. "The fact is, you're not making progress. You're stagnant." Bruno was financially independent by your age. He had a career. He had direction. You have neither. I looked at Bruno, hoping for maybe some support, some indication that he thought this was too harsh. He just stared back at me with that same smug expression, arms crossed, saying nothing. My mother finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "We think it's time for you to move out," she said. "We've supported you long enough, Daniel. You need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. You need to learn that the world doesn't owe you anything." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Move out?" I asked. "Move out where? I barely make $1,000 a month. How am I supposed to afford rent?" "That's not our problem anymore," my father said. "You're an adult. Adults figure these things out. We're giving you 2 weeks. That should be enough time to find something." 2 weeks? I repeated. I looked at my mother. "Are you serious about this?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. She just nodded, still looking at the floor. "Yes," she said quietly. "We're serious." I turned to Bruno, desperate now. "You think this is okay?" I asked him. "You think kicking me out with 2 weeks' notice and $1,000 to my name is reasonable?" He finally spoke, and his words are burned into my memory. "Honestly, Daniel? Yeah, I do," he said. "You've had a year. You've had every advantage. Mom and Dad paid for your college. They've given you free room and board for 11 months while you've worked a part-time job and accomplished basically nothing. At some point, you need to take responsibility for your own life. This is that point." The conversation lasted maybe 15 minutes total, though it felt like hours. 15 minutes to end 22 years of family. They had clearly discussed this beforehand, probably multiple times, and had made their decision without including me. There was no negotiation. There was no compromise. It was final. I had 2 weeks to get out. I moved out 13 days later. I found a basement apartment through a Craigslist ad that I responded to in a panic at 11 p.m. one night. It was $680 a month plus utilities, which meant roughly $750 total. It was 420 square feet, had one small window that looked out at ground level where people walked by, and smelled permanently like mildew no matter how much I cleaned. The ceiling was so low I could touch it without stretching. There was black mold in the corner of the bathroom that the landlord promised to fix but never did. But it was mine, or at least I was renting it, and it wasn't my parents' house. I remember the day I moved out. It was March 28th, a Monday. I had rented a U-Haul van for $49.99 plus mileage. I loaded everything I owned into it: my clothes, my laptop, my desk, my bed, about 15 boxes of books, and random possessions. It took me 4 trips up and down the stairs. My mother watched from the front window the entire time. She didn't come outside. She didn't offer to help. She didn't say goodbye. She just stood there behind the glass watching me like I was a stranger. My father was in his study with the door closed. I could see the light under the door, so I knew he was in there, but he didn't come out. Bruno was at work. He had texted me that morning. Good luck with the move. That was it. 3 words. No offer to help. No suggestion to grab lunch afterward. Nothing. I drove away from that house with $240 in my bank account, a car that barely ran, and a crushing feeling of loneliness that I didn't know what to do with. I was 22 years old and I felt like I had been thrown away. For the first 3 months I tried to maintain contact. I called every Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m., the time we had always done family phone calls when Bruno was away at college. I figured maybe if I kept calling, if I kept showing up, even just over the phone, eventually things would normalize. Maybe my parents just needed me to prove I could survive on my own. Maybe once they saw I was making it work, they'd soften. My mother answered the first 2 calls. Both conversations lasted less than 4 minutes. The first time, she sounded uncomfortable, rushed. "Oh, hi, Daniel," she said. "I'm actually in the middle of something. Can I call you back later?" She never called back. The second time, 3 weeks later, she was more direct. "Daniel, I don't think these calls are helpful," she said. "You need to focus on building your own life, and we need to focus on ours. It's better if we have some space." "Some space?" I asked. "For how long?" She didn't answer directly. "We'll reach out when we're ready," she said. Then she hung up. After that, my calls went straight to voicemail. I left messages at first. "Just checking in. Hope everyone's doing okay. Give me a call when you get a chance." Then the messages got more desperate. "Please call me back. I just want to talk. I don't understand why you're doing this." Then they got angry. "You can't just throw me away like this. I'm your son. This isn't fair." Then they stopped altogether because what was the point? By month 4, my number was blocked. I knew because when I called, I didn't even get voicemail anymore. It went straight to a message saying the number was not accepting calls. I tried texting. The messages showed as delivered but never as read. I tried emailing. No responses. I tried sending a letter through actual mail. It came back marked, "Return to sender." My brother never reached out. Not once. Not a single text message. Not a phone call. Not an email. Nothing on my birthday, which was April 3rd, just a week after I moved out. Nothing on Christmas. Nothing on Thanksgiving. Nothing, ever. It was like I had ceased to exist. The only person from my family who stayed in touch was my Aunt Margaret, my mother's older sister. She was 71 years old when all of this happened, had never married, never had children, and had spent 40 years as a chemical engineer for Riverside Pharmaceuticals. She had 3 patents to her name, had traveled to 34 countries, and had always been the black sheep of the family because she had chosen career and independence over the traditional path of marriage and motherhood. My mother had always been slightly embarrassed by Margaret, though she never said it directly. You could tell in the way she talked about her, always adding qualifications. My sister Margaret, she's very successful in her career, of course, but she never settled down, never had a family of her own. The implication being that something was missing, that Margaret's life was somehow incomplete despite her obvious success and happiness. Aunt Margaret called me 2 weeks after I moved out. I was sitting in my basement apartment eating ramen noodles for dinner because it was the only thing I could afford that week. My phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. "Daniel, it's your Aunt Margaret," she said. "I heard what happened. Your mother told me. I think they're being idiots, but that's between you and them. I just want you to know that you're still family to me. You'll always be family to me." I started crying right there on the phone. I couldn't help it. It was the first time in 2 weeks that someone from my family had said something kind to me, had acknowledged that what happened was wrong. Margaret let me cry for a minute, didn't try to stop me or make me feel embarrassed, just waited patiently on the other end of the line. When I finally composed myself, she said, "I want you to meet me for lunch on Saturday, 1 p.m. at that Italian place on 5th Avenue, Romano's. My treat. We're going to have a proper meal and you're going to tell me how you're really doing." We met that Saturday. I showed up 10 minutes early because I was nervous. Margaret arrived exactly at 1 p.m., walking with a slight limp from her arthritis but otherwise looking strong and sharp in a navy blue pantsuit. She hugged me tight, ordered us a bottle of sparkling water, and made me tell her everything. Not just the surface level stuff, but everything. How I was feeling, what my apartment was like, what my financial situation really looked like, whether I was eating enough. I was honest with her. I told her I was scared. I told her I had $680 in my bank account after paying first month's rent and deposit. I told her I was working 40 hours a week now at the coffee shop, picking up every shift I could, but that after rent and utilities and food and my student loan payment, I had maybe $50 left over each month, sometimes less. I told her I felt like I had failed, like maybe my parents were right, and I was just a disappointment who couldn't get his life together. Margaret listened to all of it. Then she put down her fork, looked me directly in the eyes, and said something I will never forget. "Daniel," she said, "your parents are wrong. They're not bad people, but they're wrong about this. You're 22 years old. You have a college degree. You're working full-time to support yourself. You're not on drugs, you're not in jail, you're not hurting anyone, you're just trying to figure out your path, and that's not only okay, it's normal. Most 22-year-olds don't have it all figured out. Your brother is the exception, not the rule. And your parents punishing you for not being exactly like him is cruel and short-sighted." She continued, "I'm not going to give you money, because I think you need to know you can do this on your own. But I'm going to give you something more valuable than money. I'm going to give you someone who believes in you. I believe in you, Daniel. I believe you're going to figure this out. And I'm going to check in on you every month to make sure you're okay, not because I doubt you, but because everyone needs someone in their corner." And she did. For the next 10 years, Aunt Margaret called me on the first Sunday of every month at 2 p.m. She never missed a call. Not once. We'd talk for 30 to 60 minutes. Sometimes we'd talk about practical things, job searches and bills and apartment problems. Sometimes we'd talk about books or politics or her latest trip. Sometimes I'd just vent and she'd listen. And every few months she'd take me out to lunch or dinner, always her treat, and we'd catch up in person. She was there for all of it. She was there 6 months after I moved out when I finally landed my first freelance graphic design client, a small local nonprofit that needed a logo redesign. They paid me $400, which was the most money I'd ever made from design work, and I called her immediately to tell her. She took me to dinner that week to celebrate, a nice steakhouse where she insisted I order whatever I wanted. "You did this," she kept saying. "You made this happen. I'm so proud of you." She was there a year later when I got my second client, then my third, then my fifth. She was there when I quit the coffee shop after 2 years because I was finally making enough from freelance work to support myself. $2,800 a month. Barely enough, but enough. She was there when I had bad months where I made nothing and had to borrow money from friends. She was there when I had panic attacks about money, about my future, about whether I was ever going to be okay. She was there when I turned 25 and realized my parents hadn't contacted me in 3 years. She was there when I turned 27 and started dating Rachel, a woman I met at a networking event. She was there when Rachel and I broke up after 2 years because Rachel wanted to move to Seattle for a job, and I couldn't leave because I was finally building something stable. She was there when I bought my first car with cash, a used Honda Civic with 89,000 miles that cost me $6,200. She was there when I signed the lease on a better apartment, one with actual windows and no mold, for $980 a month. She was there when I landed my first major client, a tech startup that paid me $8,500 for a complete brand identity package. By year 5, I was making $78,000 a year from freelance work. By year 7, I was making $89,000. By year 8, I had saved $47,000 for a down payment on a small one-bedroom condo in a decent neighborhood. When I closed on that condo, Aunt Margaret came to my housewarming party with a bottle of champagne and a framed print she'd bought from a local artist. She gave a toast. To Daniel, she said, who was told he'd never amount to anything and proved them all wrong. "I'm so damn proud of you." I cried that night too, but they were happy tears. Meanwhile, my parents never reached out. Not once in 8 years. Not when I bought the condo. Not when I turned 30. Not when I posted occasional updates on social media. Though I eventually stopped doing that because it felt performative and sad. I had cousins who clearly still talked to my parents. I'd see them commenting on each other's Facebook posts, and none of them ever reached out to me either. I was completely cut off. I was a ghost. The son who never existed. Then, 7 months ago, everything changed. On a cold Tuesday morning in October, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered, thinking it might be a potential client. "Mr. Montgomery," a man's voice said. "This is David Cheng. I'm an attorney with Chung & Associates. I'm calling regarding the estate of Margaret Eleanor Thompson." I paused. "What about it?" I asked carefully. "I'm very sorry to inform you that Ms. Thompson passed away last night," he said. "She had a stroke in her sleep. It was very peaceful. She didn't suffer. The doctor said it was instantaneous. The world seemed to stop." I sat down heavily on my couch. I couldn't breathe. Margaret was gone. The one person in my family who had stood by me, who had believed in me, who had been there for every victory and every failure, was gone. Mr. Cheng continued speaking, but I barely heard him. He was saying something about the will, about needing to meet with me, about estate proceedings. I finally interrupted him. "I'm sorry," I said. "Can you repeat that?" He did. "Ms. Thompson left very specific instructions in her will," he said. "You are named as the primary beneficiary of her estate. I'd like to schedule a meeting with you as soon as possible to go over the details. Would you be available this Friday at 2 p.m.? I met with David Cheng that Friday at his office downtown, a sleek, modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows. He had a corner office on the 17th floor. He was maybe 45 years old, professional, kind. He offered me coffee, which I declined because I was too nervous to drink anything. He sat me down and slid a thick folder across his desk. "Your aunt was one of my favorite clients," he said. "She was incredibly organized, very clear about her wishes, and very generous. She updated her will 6 months ago when she was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. She knew she was running out of time, and she wanted to make sure everything was in order." He opened the folder. "Ms. Thompson's estate consists of the following: her condominium, valued at approximately $580,000, her investment portfolio, valued at approximately $720,000, her savings accounts, totaling approximately $140,000, and various personal effects. After taxes, probate costs, and estate fees, you're looking at a net inheritance of approximately $1.2 million. I stared at him. "I'm sorry, what?" I said. He repeated it. I sat there in complete shock. $1.2 million. I couldn't process it. My Aunt Margaret, who had been my only family for 10 years, had left me everything. Not just some money. Everything. Mr. Cheng continued. "There are a few other provisions in the will. Ms. Thompson left $15,000 to the Riverside Animal Shelter and $10,000 to St. Mark's Episcopal Church, where she was a member. But the rest, the overwhelming majority of her estate, goes to you." He slid another document across the desk. "She also left you this." It was a letter, handwritten in her distinctive slanted cursive, my name written on the envelope. I opened it with shaking hands. The letter read, "Daniel, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I hope I gave you enough warning to say goodbye properly. I want you to know that these past 10 years, watching you build a life from absolutely nothing, have been the greatest joy of my later years. You were thrown away like garbage by people who should have treasured you, and you turned yourself into gold. I am so incredibly proud of you. This money is yours because you deserve it. You were the only person in this family who visited me because you cared, not because you wanted something. You were the only one who called just to talk, who remembered my birthday, who showed up when I was sick. You earned this, not through inheritance, but through being a good human being. Your mother, my sister, made a choice 10 years ago. So did your father and your brother. They will likely come crawling back when they find out about this money. I need you to hear this. You owe them nothing. Not your time. Not your money. Not your forgiveness. Nothing. You've spent 10 years building a life without them. Don't let them back in just because they suddenly realize you're valuable. You were always valuable. They were just too blind and stubborn to see it. Live your life, Daniel. Be happy. Travel. Fall in love. Build something beautiful. And remember that you were always enough, exactly as you were. Love, always. Aunt Margaret." I read that letter 3 times, sitting in David Cheng's office, By the third time, I was crying openly, and David politely pretended to review other documents while I composed myself. When I finally left his office an hour later, I felt two things simultaneously: overwhelming gratitude and deep, deep dread. Because I knew exactly what was going to happen next. My family was going to find out about this money, and they were going to come back. I was right. The will had to be filed with the county clerk's office, which meant it became public record. Anyone who knew to look could find it. It took exactly 1 week. On the 7th day after my meeting with David Cheng, at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, I got a text message from a number I hadn't seen in 10 years. I recognized it immediately. It was Bruno. The message said, "Hey Daniel, I heard about Aunt Margaret. I'm so sorry for your loss. I know it's been a long time since we talked. I've been thinking about you a lot lately, especially after Dad passed. I think we should talk. Family is important and life is too short to hold grudges. Let me know when you're free. Would love to grab coffee and catch up." I stared at that message for 20 minutes. I read it over and over again, dissecting every word. Not once did he acknowledge what they had done. Not once did he apologize for 10 years of silence. Just vague language about, "It's been a long time," and "Life is too short for grudges," as if I was the one holding a grudge instead of them being the ones who had abandoned me. And then there was the mention of Dad passing. My father had died. Nobody had told me. I immediately opened my laptop and searched for his obituary. I found it. Richard Paul Montgomery, 71, passed away suddenly on June 14th, 2 years ago. He is survived by his wife Patricia, son Bruno, daughter-in-law Melissa, and granddaughters Emma and Sophie. There was no mention of me. I had been erased so completely that even in death I didn't exist. I showed Bruno's text to my best friend Marcus, who I'd met at a networking event 5 years earlier and who had become like family to me. Marcus read it and said immediately, "They want the money." "I know," I replied. "So what are you going to do?" he asked. I honestly didn't know. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let them sit in silence like they had done to me for 10 years. Part of me wanted to respond with every angry thought I'd accumulated over a decade. And part of me, the part I was ashamed of, wanted to believe that maybe they had genuinely changed. Maybe they regretted what they did. Maybe Dad's death had given them perspective. I sat with it for 3 hours. Finally, I responded, "I'm willing to meet and talk. Let me know when and where." Bruno replied in 4 minutes. "How about Saturday at 2 p.m., Cafe Central downtown? I'll bring Mom, and maybe a few others. It would be good for everyone to reconnect." Saturday came. I arrived at Cafe Central at 1:55 p.m. It was a modern place with exposed brick walls, industrial lighting, Edison bulbs, and overpriced lattes that cost $6.50. I ordered a black coffee for $3.75 and sat at a table in the back corner where I could see the door. My hands were shaking. I had spent 3 days trying to figure out what I was going to say, planning and replanning conversations in my head, and I still had no idea. Bruno walked in at 2:03 p.m. My mother was with him, and behind them were 10 other people. I recognized most of them. My cousin Sophia, who was now 27 years old and worked as a physical therapist. My uncle Henrique, my mother's younger brother who I'd always liked. My Aunt Caroline, 2 of Bruno's friends whose names I couldn't remember, and several other relatives I vaguely recognized. They had brought an audience. This wasn't a private reconciliation. This was a performance. Bruno spotted me immediately and walked over with that same fake smile I remembered from 10 years ago, the one he used when he wanted something. "Daniel," he said loudly, like we were old friends meeting after a short time apart. "It's so good to see you, man." He extended his hand across the table. I didn't take it. I just looked at him. His smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly, pulling his hand back and sitting down across from me. My mother sat next to him. She looked older, much older. Her hair was almost entirely gray now. She had deep lines around her eyes and mouth. She looked tired, worn down. She didn't try to hug me. She didn't smile. She just said quietly, "Hello, Daniel." I nodded. "Hello, Patricia." I used her first name deliberately. I saw her face twitch, a tiny flinch that told me she noticed and it hurt. Good. The others took tables nearby, close enough to hear our conversation, but far enough to maintain a pretense of giving us privacy. Sophia gave me a small, sad smile. Henrique looked uncomfortable. The others just watched with obvious curiosity. Bruno launched into his speech immediately. It was clearly rehearsed. Look, Daniel, I know it's been a really long time. 10 years is a long time. And I know things ended badly back then. We all have regrets about how that situation went down. But at the end of the day, we're family, right? Blood is blood. And I think family should stick together, especially during difficult times. Life is short. Dad's death really drove that home for me, you know? It made me realize what's really important. He paused, looking at me like he expected me to respond. I said nothing. I just watched him. He continued. I heard about Aunt Margaret, and man, I'm really sorry, Daniel. She was a good person. She was always kind to me when I was a kid. I remember she used to take me to the Science Museum. Remember that? He smiled, trying to create a moment of shared nostalgia. I remembered no such thing. He pushed forward. Anyway, I've been doing a lot of thinking, especially this past year. A lot of soul-searching. And Mom and I, we've talked about this at length, we really have. We both feel like it's time to move forward. It's time to rebuild this family. We want you back in our lives, Daniel. We genuinely do. I let the silence stretch out. I counted to 10 in my head. Then I spoke for the first time. Why now? Bruno blinked. What? Why now? I repeated. Why after 10 years of absolute silence are you suddenly interested in rebuilding? He glanced at my mother. She was staring down at her untouched coffee. Well, he said carefully, like I said, Dad's death really put things in perspective. It made us realize life is too short for family to be divided. We should have reached out sooner, and I regret that we didn't. But better late than never, right? Dad died 2 years ago, I said flatly. You didn't tell me then. You didn't call me. You didn't invite me to his funeral. My name wasn't even mentioned in his obituary. I looked directly at my mother. Did you know about that, Patricia? That I wasn't mentioned? That I was erased? She looked up at me, her eyes wet. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Yes, she said. I knew. Bruno wrote the obituary. We decided it would be too complicated to include you when you hadn't been part of our lives for so long. Too complicated, I repeated. Right. I looked back at Bruno. So you didn't think to tell me 2 years ago when it happened. But now, 7 months after Aunt Margaret dies, suddenly you want to reconnect. So I'll ask you again, Bruno. What changed? What specifically happened between Dad's death 2 years ago and right now that made you decide family is important? The table got very quiet. I could feel the people at nearby tables leaning in slightly, trying to hear better. Bruno's smile was completely gone now. He looked frustrated. I think you're being unfair, he said. We were grieving. We weren't thinking clearly. And yes, maybe we should have reached out sooner, but we're reaching out now. Isn't that what matters? I leaned forward. What changed, Bruno? He didn't answer. I waited. The silence stretched for 30 full seconds, which feels like an eternity in a public space. Finally, Bruno tried a different approach. Look, he said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. I also wanted to talk to you about something practical. It's about Aunt Margaret's estate. I assume there were significant assets involved, given that she worked for 4 decades and never had kids. She owned her condo outright, right? And I know she had investments. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice like we were discussing something confidential. The thing is, Daniel, you're still relatively young. You're what, 32 now? And I don't mean this as an insult, but you probably don't have much experience managing large sums of money. None of us do, really, until we're faced with it. Mom and I were talking, and we thought it might be wise to discuss how to handle everything responsibly. Maybe we could set up a family trust or something. That way the money is managed properly, it benefits everyone, and we avoid any potential problems down the line. And there it was. The real reason for this meeting. I sat back in my chair. Everyone benefits, I repeated slowly. Exactly, Bruno said, nodding enthusiastically like I was finally getting it. Look, Aunt Margaret was Mom's sister. There's a legitimate moral argument that some of that money should stay in the main family line. I'm not saying you don't deserve anything, you absolutely do. But it should be shared. That's what family does. They share. I looked at my mother. Do you agree with this, Patricia? She looked up at me, and for a moment I saw something in her eyes. Was it shame? Regret? I couldn't tell. I think Bruno makes some valid points, she said quietly. Family wealth should be handled carefully. It should benefit the whole family. I nodded slowly. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. I had spent the last 3 days preparing for this exact moment. I had gone through old backup drives, old email accounts, old phone records. I had found everything. Every text message, every voicemail, Every piece of evidence I had kept from 10 years ago, saved in multiple places because some part of me had known I might need it someday. Before we talk about sharing anything, I said calmly, I think we need to establish some context. I think everyone here, I gestured to the nearby tables, should understand exactly what kind of family we're talking about, what happened 10 years ago. Because I get the strong sense that maybe not everyone knows the full story. I placed my phone on the table. My hand hovered over the screen. Bruno's eyes widened slightly. What are you doing? He asked, his voice suddenly nervous. I'm providing context, I said. I looked around at the nearby tables. Sophia was leaning forward, her expression confused. Enrique looked wary. The others were watching intently, sensing something was about to happen. I want everyone here to hear something, I continued. I want everyone to understand what actually happened 10 years ago, because clearly there's been some revisionist history going on. Bruno reached across the table like he was going to grab my phone. Don't, I said quietly, pulling it back. He froze. My mother looked like she desperately wanted to disappear. Too late for that. I pressed play on the first voice message. My father's voice filled the small cafe. I had turned the volume up just loud enough for nearby tables to hear clearly. The audio quality was perfect. Every word crisp and clear. Daniel, this is your father. Your mother and I have been discussing your situation at length, and we have reached a decision. We are no longer interested in maintaining any contact with you whatsoever. You have proven yourself to be irresponsible, directionless, and frankly, an embarrassment to this family. You had every advantage. A college education, a safe home, parents who supported you, and you have squandered all of it. Bruno has agreed with us that this is the best course of action for everyone involved. We are done enabling your immaturity. Do not call this house again. Do not show up at our door. Do not contact us through other family members. You are an adult now, and you made your choices. We are making ours. You are no longer welcome in this family in any capacity. This is not up for discussion, this is final. Goodbye, Daniel. The message ended. The cafe was absolutely silent. You could hear the espresso machine hissing in the background, but every conversation had stopped. People at other tables were blatantly staring now. My mother's face had gone completely pale. Bruno looked like he'd been punched in the stomach, but I wasn't done. Not even close. I played the second message. This one was my mother. Daniel, stop. Please just stop calling. You're making this harder than it needs to be for all of us. We have made our decision as a family, and you need to respect that and move on with your life. You're not our responsibility anymore. You're not our concern. We have our own lives to live, and you need to build yours separately. I'm blocking your number after this message, so don't bother calling again, and don't try to contact us through other people. We've asked everyone in the family not to act as intermediaries. This is over. Accept it and move on. Goodbye. I could see tears starting to form in my mother's eyes. Several people at nearby tables had their hands over their mouths. Sophia looked absolutely horrified, but I had one more. The third message. Bruno's voice. Hey, Daniel, it's your brother. Look, man, I'm gonna be real with you because I think you need to hear this. You need to just accept reality and stop fighting it. Mom and Dad are completely done with you. And honestly, I am too. You're a loser, dude. You're 22 years old, working at a coffee shop, living off Mom and Dad's goodwill with a useless degree and zero ambition. You have no plan. You have no drive. You have no future. I'm genuinely embarrassed to call you my brother if I'm being honest. You're dead weight. You're everything I never want to be. So do yourself a favor and just move on. Stop trying to be part of a family that doesn't want you anymore. Get a life. Get some self-respect. And don't ever contact me again. We're done. You're on your own. That's how it should be. I let that last message hang in the air for a long moment before stopping the playback. The silence in the cafe was absolutely crushing. My mother was crying now, silent tears running down her face. Bruno looked like he wanted to crawl under the table and die. Sophia was staring at them with her mouth literally hanging open. Uncle Enrique looked furious, his face red, his jaw clenched. Other people at nearby tables were whispering to each other, shooting looks of disgust at my family. I spoke quietly, but in that silence, every word carried perfectly. Those messages were from 10 years ago, March and April of that year to be exact. I was 22 years old. I had been out of their house for 3 weeks to 2 months. I was working 40 to 50 hours a week at 2 different jobs, trying desperately to afford rent and food and student loan payments. I called every Sunday at 2 p.m. because that's what families do. That's what we had always done. These messages were their responses. After these, I never called again. I respected their wishes. I moved on with my life, just like they told me to. I looked directly at Bruno. You told me I was a loser with no future. You told me you were embarrassed to be my brother. You told me to never contact you again. So I didn't. For 3,650 days, that's 10 years for anyone counting, I didn't. I built an entire life without any of you. I worked my ass off. I built a career from nothing. I bought a home. I created a family of friends who actually cared about whether I was alive or dead. And not once, not a single time in those 3,650 days, did any of you reach out. Not on my birthday, not on Christmas, not when I bought my condo, not when I was struggling, not when I needed help. Never. My mother tried to speak, her voice choked with tears. Daniel, we were angry. We were hurting. We didn't. I held up my hand, cutting her off. I'm not finished, I said firmly. She went quiet immediately. Then Aunt Margaret died. I continued. The will was filed. It became public record. And 7 days later, I got the first communication from any of you in 10 years. A text from Bruno about wanting to grab coffee and catch up, about how family is important, about how life is too short for grudges. I looked around the table at all the faces watching us. Let me be very, very clear about something, because I want there to be no confusion whatsoever. Aunt Margaret left me her entire estate. After taxes and fees, it's approximately $1.2 million. She left it to me because I was the only person in this entire family who treated her like she mattered. I had lunch with her once a month, every single month for 10 years. I called her every week just to talk. I visited her when she was sick. I was there, holding her hand. When she died in the hospital, I pointed at Bruno. Where were you? He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I turned to my mother. Where were you, Patricia? When was the last time you even spoke to your own sister? She looked down, unable to answer. That's what I thought, I said. Margaret knew exactly what would happen. I pulled the letter from my pocket, carefully unfolding it. She left me a letter. Let me read you the relevant part, because she was smarter than all of us. I read out loud. They will likely come crawling back when they find out about this money. I need you to hear this. You owe them nothing. Not your time, not your money, not your forgiveness. Nothing. I refolded the letter and put it back in my pocket. She knew. She knew exactly what you would do. She called it perfectly. And she was right. Bruno finally found his voice. It came out defensive, almost desperate. Daniel, come on. We made mistakes. We were wrong about how we handled things. I admit that. But it's been 10 years, man. People change. People grow. Don't you think we deserve a second chance? Don't you believe in forgiveness? We're family. That has to count for something. I shook my head slowly. Let me ask you something, Bruno. Answer honestly. If Aunt Margaret had left me nothing, if she'd left everything to charity or to a cat sanctuary or to literally anyone else, if I was still just a freelance graphic designer making $60,000 or $70,000 a year, would you be sitting here right now? Would you have sent that text message? Would we be having this conversation? He didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. That's exactly what I thought, I said. This isn't about reconciliation. This isn't about family or forgiveness or second chances. This is about $1.2 million that you think you're entitled to. This is about money you think should have gone to you, or at least should be shared with you, because you can't imagine why Aunt Margaret would choose me over you. Well, I can tell you exactly why. Because I was there. Because I cared. Because I showed up. That's why. My mother finally spoke again, her voice breaking completely. Daniel, please, she said through tears. I know we hurt you. I know we made terrible, terrible mistakes, but I'm your mother. Doesn't that count for anything? Don't I deserve a chance to make this right? I looked at her for a long time. I tried to find some feeling in my chest, some sympathy or compassion or connection. There was nothing, just emptiness where my family used to be. You told me I wasn't your son anymore, I said quietly. Those were your exact words in one of those messages, Patricia. You said I wasn't your responsibility, that you were done, that I needed to build my life separately. You blocked my number. You told other family members not to talk to me. You didn't tell me when my father died. You erased me from his obituary like I never existed. So no, being my biological mother doesn't count for anything anymore. You surrendered that title 10 years ago. You don't get to claim it back now because it's suddenly convenient. She broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. I felt nothing. That was the strangest part. I had imagined this moment so many times over the years, imagined them finally apologizing, and in those imaginations I had always felt something: anger, relief, sadness, something. But sitting there watching her cry, I felt absolutely nothing. The grief was done. I had mourned this family years ago. Uncle Enrique suddenly stood up from his table. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. He walked over to us, his face dark with anger. "I had no idea," he said, looking at my mother and Bruno with open disgust. "Patricia, you told me that Daniel had cut off contact with the family. You said he wanted nothing to do with us. You said he had become bitter and distant, and that you had tried repeatedly to reach out, but he refused. You lied to me. You lied to everyone." My mother looked up at him, mascara running down her face. "Enrique, you don't understand. It was complicated. I heard those messages," he interrupted her. "We all heard them. There's nothing complicated about it. You threw him out, you cut him off, you told him he was an embarrassment and that you never wanted to see him again. And then you lied to the entire family about what happened." He turned to me. "Daniel, I am so sorry. I'm sorry I believed their version of events for all these years. I'm sorry I never reached out to you myself to hear your side. If you want nothing to do with any of us, including me, I completely understand and I don't blame you one bit." He turned back to Bruno and my mother. "You should be ashamed of yourselves," he said coldly. "Both of you. What you did to him was cruel. Coming back now for money is disgusting." He walked toward the door. As he passed by my table, he stopped and put his hand briefly on my shoulder. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I'm glad Margaret left everything to you. You clearly deserved it more than anyone else in this family." Then he left. 2 other relatives got up and followed him out without a word. My cousin Sophia stood up next, her eyes red. She came over to our table. She looked at Bruno and my mother, and her voice was shaking with emotion. "You told me Daniel had abandoned us," she said. "You told me he was selfish and ungrateful. You told me he refused to be part of the family. I believed you." She turned to me. "Daniel, I'm so sorry. I should have questioned their story. I should have tried to find you myself to hear your side. I'm sorry I didn't." She started to walk away, then turned back. "One more thing," she said to Bruno and my mother. "I was going to tell you both this privately, but you know what? You deserve to hear it publicly since that's apparently how we're doing things now. I think you're horrible people, and I'm done associating with you. Don't call me. Don't come to my apartment. We're done." She left. 3 more people got up and walked out, then 2 more. Within 5 minutes, only Bruno, my mother, Bruno's 2 friends, and 1 aunt were left. Everyone else had gone, and the ones remaining looked deeply uncomfortable. Bruno tried desperately to regain control of the situation. His voice came out too loud, too aggressive. "This is not fair," he said. "You're making us out to be monsters, Daniel. We're not perfect, okay? I admit that. But neither are you. You're sitting here acting like you're so much better than us, like you've never made mistakes, like you're some kind of saint. This holier-than-thou attitude is exactly why we had problems with you in the first place. You always thought you were special, always thought the rules didn't apply to you." I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had absolutely nothing left to lose. "You want to know what I did with my life after you kicked me out, Bruno? You want to know what the loser accomplished? Let me tell you. I spent the first year barely surviving. I worked 60-hour weeks between 2 jobs. I ate rice and beans for months at a time because that was literally all I could afford. I slept on a mattress on the floor because I couldn't afford a bed frame. I cried myself to sleep more times than I can count because I felt so completely alone. But I survived. And then I thrived. I pulled out my phone and pulled up my freelance portfolio website, turning it toward him. I make $94,000 a year now. I own a condo worth $340,000 with only $180,000 left on the mortgage. I have $67,000 in savings, not counting the inheritance. I have clients who respect me. I have friends who actually care if I'm okay. I built all of that with 0 help from any of you. Less than 0, actually, because I had to overcome the damage you did to me. So you tell me, Bruno, who's the loser now? Who's the one with no future? Who's the embarrassment?" His face went bright red. "So this is about money for you too then?" He shot back. "You want to rub your success in our faces? You want to show off how much better you are? This whole thing is just revenge." I laughed. It was a real laugh. The first genuine one I'd had since walking into this cafe. No, Bruno, I said. This isn't about money. This is about consequences. You spent 10 years pretending I didn't exist. I'm making sure you understand what that felt like. I'm making sure you understand that actions have consequences, that you can't just throw someone away and then pick them back up when it's convenient. That's the lesson here. I stood up. I looked at my mother one more time. She was still crying, her face in her hands. Part of me, a very small part, felt bad, but the larger part of me remembered being 22 years old, sitting in that moldy basement apartment, wondering what I had done wrong, wondering why my family didn't love me anymore. That part felt nothing but relief that this was finally over. I'm going to say this once and only once, so listen carefully, I said. My voice was calm, clear, final. You are not getting $1 single from Aunt Margaret's estate. Not 1 penny. That money is mine, legally and morally. If you try to contest the will, you will lose. David Cheng, Margaret's lawyer, made absolutely certain that the will is ironclad. She was mentally competent when she wrote it. She was explicit about her wishes. You have no case. But more importantly, even if you somehow had a legal leg to stand on, I would spend every last cent fighting you. I would burn through all $1.2 million in legal fees before I let you have any of it. Do you understand me? Bruno started to say something. I held up my hand. I'm not finished, I said. You are also not welcome in my life. At all. In any capacity. I don't want phone calls. I don't want text messages. I don't want emails. I don't want apologies or explanations or attempts at reconciliation. I don't want birthday cards or Christmas cards or any communication whatsoever. You made your choice 10 years ago. You said I wasn't family. I'm holding you to that. We are not family. We're strangers who happen to share some DNA. That's all we'll ever be. My mother sobbed harder. Please, Daniel, she said, I can't do this. I can't live with this. Please don't do this. You already did it, I said. For 10 years. I'm sure you'll manage. I looked at the few remaining people. If any of you actually want to be in my life, if any of you actually care about me as a person and not as a source of money, I'm open to that. Sophia has my number. She can give it to you. But understand this. If you maintain close relationships with them, pointing at Bruno and my mother, then you're choosing a side. Choose carefully. I walked out of that cafe, through the door into the bright afternoon sunlight. I didn't look back. I walked 3 blocks to where I had parked my car, sat in the driver's seat, and finally let myself breathe. My phone started buzzing immediately. Text messages, calls, voicemails. I silenced it and drove home. The next few days were complete chaos. Word spread through the extended family like wildfire. I got phone calls and messages from relatives I barely remembered. Some I hadn't spoken to in 15 years. Some were apologetic, saying they had no idea what really happened, and that they were sorry for believing my parents' lies. Some were angry at Bruno and my mother for putting them in this position. Some tried to stay neutral and encouraged reconciliation. Some were angry at me for airing family business in public and being vindictive. I ignored most of them. Sophia reached out 3 days later. She sent me a long text message apologizing profusely for believing their story, explaining that she had always wondered but never pushed, and saying she wanted to rebuild a genuine relationship if I was open to it. I appreciated that. We met for coffee a week later, just the 2 of us at a different cafe across town. She told me that the family was essentially fractured now. Several relatives had completely cut off contact with Bruno and my mother. Bruno's wife, Melissa, was furious with him, not just for how he'd treated me, but for the fact that he'd kept all of this hidden from her for their entire relationship. She was apparently questioning whether she even knew who she was married to. My mother had stopped going to family events because people were either overtly hostile to her or coldly polite, which was somehow worse. I didn't feel victorious about any of this. I didn't feel happy or satisfied or vindicated. I just felt tired, exhausted, empty. Sophia asked me if I felt like I had gotten closure. I told her honestly that I didn't know. I didn't even know what closure was supposed to feel like. 2 months after the cafe confrontation, I received a letter in the mail. The return address was my childhood home. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. It was from my mother, handwritten on her stationery, 5 pages long, front and back. It was an apology, a real one, or at least what she believed was a real one. She wrote about how she had convinced herself over the years that kicking me out had been tough love, that I had needed to learn independence and self-sufficiency, that it was for my own good. She wrote about how when Margaret died and left me everything, she had felt both immense pride and crushing shame. Pride because it meant I had succeeded and built something real. Shame because she realized she had missed all of it. She hadn't been there for any of my struggles or victories. She had thrown me away and missed watching me become someone. She wrote about Dad, about how he had tried to write me a text message 3 years before he died, apologizing and asking if we could talk, but that she had convinced him not to send it. She said she told him I had moved on and wouldn't want to hear from him, that it would just reopen old wounds. She admitted now that she had been wrong, that she had been protecting her own pride, and couldn't face the possibility that I would reject them the way they had rejected me. She wrote that she knew I would probably never forgive her, and that she didn't blame me if I didn't. She wrote that she didn't expect or want money from the inheritance. She just wanted me to know that she was sorry, that she loved me even though she had absolutely no right to say that anymore, that she would understand if I never wanted to see her again, but that if I ever changed my mind, if I ever wanted to talk, she would be there. I read that letter 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer in my desk and didn't respond, not because I was trying to punish her, but because I genuinely didn't know what to say. I needed time to process it. Maybe someday I would respond. Maybe not. I gave myself permission not to know. The inheritance money was fully transferred to my account 4 months after Margaret's death, after all the probate proceedings were complete. The final amount, after every tax and fee and expense, was $186,120. I stared at that number in my bank account for a solid 10 minutes, refreshing the page multiple times to make sure it was real. I did the responsible things first. I paid off my condo entirely, which had $179,000 remaining on the mortgage. I put $700,000 into a diversified portfolio of index funds with a low-fee investment firm. I put $250,000 in high-yield savings as an emergency fund. That left me with just over $57,000 in accessible cash. I didn't buy a fancy car. I didn't quit my job. I didn't dramatically change my lifestyle. I just felt safer, more stable, freer. I did make one significant purchase. I used $15,000 to take Sophia out for a very nice dinner at the best restaurant in the city, and then I helped pay for a professional certification program she had wanted to do but couldn't afford. She tried to refuse, said it was too much, but I insisted. This is what actual family does, I told her. They help each other because they care, not because they expect something in return. 6 months after the cafe incident, I ran into Bruno completely by chance at a grocery store. I was in the produce section picking out avocados, and I looked up and there he was, 10 feet away, holding a shopping basket. We made eye contact. Both of us froze. He looked terrible. He had lost weight, maybe 15 or 20 pounds. He had dark circles under his eyes. His clothes looked wrinkled like he'd slept in them. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something, took a step toward me, then stopped. I just turned back to the avocados and continued shopping. I heard him stand there for another few seconds, then walk away. I felt nothing. I later found out from Sophia that Bruno's business had collapsed. He had made several bad investments the year before, taking on significant debt to expand his consulting firm, and then lost 2 of his 3 major clients. He was leveraged to the point of being underwater. He had apparently been hoping that if he could convince me to share the inheritance, he could use it to save his business and pay down his debts. When that fell through, everything spiraled. His business went bankrupt. He had to sell the duplex he'd been so proud of. His marriage was barely hanging on. Melissa had apparently suggested separation while they worked through their issues. Part of me felt bad for him when I heard this, but most of me didn't. Actions have consequences. He had built his entire self-image on being the successful one, the golden child, the one who did everything right. When that fell apart, he had nothing left. I, on the other hand, had built my identity on surviving, on being resourceful, on creating value even when I had nothing. That was a much more stable foundation. My mother tried to reach out a few more times over the next year. She sent me a birthday card with a handwritten note inside. She sent a Christmas card. She texted me twice asking how I was doing, if I was okay, if I needed anything. I didn't respond to any of it. I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I'd ever be ready. And that was okay. I had spent too many years trying to be the person they wanted me to be. Now I was just trying to be myself, whatever that meant. 1 year after Margaret's death, I visited her grave for the first time since the funeral. I brought a bouquet of white roses, her favorite. The headstone was simple, elegant. Margaret Eleanor Thompson, 1943-2024. Brilliant mind, generous spirit. I sat on the grass next to her grave and talked to her like she could hear me. I told her everything. About the cafe confrontation. About Bruno and my mother's desperate attempt to get money. About how her letter had been exactly right. I told her about Sophia and Uncle Enrique and the handful of relatives who had actually shown integrity. I told her about Bruno's business collapsing and my mother's letters. And I thanked her. I thanked her for believing in me when nobody else did. I thanked her for seeing me, truly seeing me, as a whole person worthy of love and respect. I thanked her for giving me not just financial security but validation. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that I wasn't the problem. Proof that I was worthy of being someone's priority. I sat there for 43 minutes by my watch. When I finally stood up to leave, brushing grass off my jeans, I felt lighter somehow. Not healed. I don't know if you ever fully heal from something like family abandonment, but lighter, less burdened. As I walked back to my car, I thought about the question that had been gnawing at me since that day at the cafe. Was I seeking justice, or was I seeking revenge? I sat with that question during the entire drive home. I thought about it for days afterward. I think what I wanted was accountability. I wanted them to understand what they had done. I wanted them to feel, even just for a moment, a fraction of what I had felt for 10 years. I wanted the truth to be public so that I wouldn't have to carry the burden of their lies anymore. Was that revenge? Maybe, but it also felt necessary. Like setting the record straight wasn't just about punishing them, but about freeing myself from the narrative they had created. Looking back now, 18 months after everything happened, I think I got what I needed. They were exposed, the truth came out. People knew what really happened. Bruno and my mother faced real consequences, social and emotional ones that they'll probably carry for the rest of their lives. And I got to walk away with my head high, knowing that I had built something meaningful from nothing, that I had survived and thrived despite them, not because of them. I'm 34 years old now. I'm still freelancing, though I've been much more selective about my clients now that I have financial security. I can afford to turn down projects that don't interest me or clients who don't respect my time. I'm dating someone new, a woman named Rachel, who I met through a hiking group. She's a middle school teacher, warm and funny and grounded. She knows about my family situation. I told her on our third date because I figured if it was going to be a deal breaker, better to know early. She just listened, asked thoughtful questions, and then said, "That sounds really painful. I'm sorry you went through that." She didn't try to fix it or convince me to reconcile or any of the usual responses people give. She just accepted it as part of my story. I love that about her. I haven't spoken to my mother or Bruno since that day at Cafe Central. I still get occasional cards from my mother. Christmas cards, birthday cards, sometimes just thinking of you cards with short handwritten notes. I don't respond, but I also don't throw them away. They sit in a drawer with her apology letter. Maybe someday I'll read them carefully. Maybe someday I'll respond, but there's no timeline for that, and I refuse to feel guilty about it. I'm not obligated to forgive. I'm not obligated to reconcile. I'm allowed to protect my peace. Sophia and I have become genuinely close. We have dinner together once a month. We text regularly about nothing important, just life stuff. She's become real family to me. Uncle Enrique reaches out occasionally, always respectfully, never pushing. We had lunch together about 6 months ago. It was nice, comfortable. He never brings up my mother or Bruno unless I ask. A few other relatives have reached out carefully, and I've been open to rebuilding with the ones who seem genuine. I think the biggest lesson I learned from all of this, the thing I want you to take away if you're going through something similar, is that family isn't just about blood. Family is about showing up. It's about being there when it's hard and inconvenient and uncomfortable. It's about caring about someone's well-being even when there's nothing in it for you. Aunt Margaret was more family to me than my biological parents ever were. Sophia is more family to me now than Bruno. And my close friends, people like Marcus who stood by me through everything, they're family too. The money was never really the point. Yes, it changed my life in practical ways. Yes, it gave me security and freedom and options I never had before. But what it really gave me was validation. It was Margaret's way of saying, "You were right. They were wrong. You deserved better." And that validation, that confirmation that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't the problem, that I was worthy of being chosen, that meant infinitely more than any dollar amount ever could. If you're watching this and you've experienced something similar, If you've been rejected or abandoned or mistreated by people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, I need you to hear this. It's not your fault. You are not too much. You are not too little. You are not broken. You are not unlovable. Some people are just incapable of seeing value in others, especially when that value doesn't match their narrow definition of success or worth. That's their limitation, not yours. That's their failure, not yours. Build your own family. Find your people, the ones who see you and value you and show up for you. Invest in relationships with people who actually demonstrate that they care, not just people who say they care. And if the people who hurt you come back when they need something from you when it's suddenly convenient for them, remember, you don't owe them anything. Not your time, not your money, not your emotional labor, not your forgiveness. You only owe yourself peace and safety and a life built on your own terms. That's the real inheritance Aunt Margaret gave me. Not the money, though that's wonderful and life-changing, but permission to choose myself, permission to walk away from people who treated me like I was disposable, permission to build a life on my own terms, with my own values, with people who actually deserve to be in it. And that permission, that freedom, is genuinely priceless. So to Bruno, to Patricia, to everyone who thought I was worthless, who thought I would amount to nothing, who thought I was the family embarrassment, here's the truth. You were wrong. You spent 10 years telling me I'd never be anything. Let me introduce myself properly. I'm Daniel Montgomery. I'm a successful graphic designer making close to 6 figures. I own property. I have money in the bank. I have people who love me and respect me and show up for me. And I built all of it without you. The inheritance just proved what I already knew. I never needed you. I never needed your approval or validation or support. I just needed to believe in myself and to be willing to do the work. And to my Aunt Margaret, wherever you are, thank you. Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible. Thank you for believing in me when I struggled to believe in myself. Thank you for showing me what real, unconditional love and support look like. Thank you for the lunches and the phone calls and the champagne toast at my housewarming party. Thank you for the inheritance. But more than that, thank you for the letter, for the validation, for telling me that I was right and they were wrong. I hope I'm making you proud. I think I am. I really think I am. If this story reminded you that actions have real consequences, that karma is very real, and that you don't have to accept toxic relationships just because someone shares your DNA, do me a favor. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring that bell so you don't miss the next story. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and whether you think I made the right choice cutting them off. I'd genuinely love to hear your perspective. Thank you so much for listening to my story, for sticking with me through all of it. And remember, family isn't who you're born to. Family is who shows up. Family is who stays. Family is who loves you on your worst days, not just your best ones. Choose your family wisely. See you in the next one.